It is 8:01 p.m. Mountain Time in Albuquerque. As is always the case, please tell me if you can hear me, if you can see me. It is the same microphone, but it is a different camera, so I'm screwing around with different equipment as always. Sometimes I think I just like messing with cameras more so than making videos, which may not necessarily be wrong. Anyhow, please put something in the chat box if you can hear me, assuming you're watching this live. If you're watching a replay, you do not have to comment that you can hear me. By that point, we will have worked it out. I have a couple of topics for today that I want to touch on. I don't yet know how extensively I want to touch on them. Mr. Bucket is here. Audio video is good on YouTube. Excellent, thank you, sir. So there are two things I want to talk about, and both came out of YouTube comments, and I just thought were interesting. One kind of took me a little bit by surprise. Chad Fry is here, thanks, sir. One of the gentlemen who apparently watches my videos has found an old article I did, 2015, almost 10 years ago, on old Russian PU scopes. These were the scopes issued on a Mosin sniper. They have a little bit of history to them. They're kind of an interesting design, and I collect Mosin guns. Probably another conversation to have some time. But the nice thing about the PU, since I did a lot of research on it way back when, I can talk about it a little bit. I can show you what it looks like on the inside. I've got a page from the original manual design documents and stuff, and we can talk a little bit. I guess from there go a little bit into how rifle scopes work. And that part was inspired by Mr. Bucket, who was here 6 minutes before me, it seems. And as a comment, I'm going to share this on the screen. As a comment from last live stream a week ago, he had a long list of questions. He added some clarifications. I will admit some of the questions I still don't understand, so it will take some clarification. But this is honestly may very well be one of the more useful things that we can do, try to answer some questions. And arguably, it's probably more interesting to see why the questions are formulated the way they are than even the answer, since sometimes we speak a different language. I think of it in one way, then I get a question asked that makes no sense to me because you guys don't think about it the same way I do. So this should be interesting. So here's what those questions look like. I will put it in the screen momentarily. There we go. All right, so this is the comment under this video, last week's live stream, and there is a total of 1 through 5 questions. Okay, I'm gonna put a link to that into the chat box so that you guys have it as well, so that you know where I'm coming from. I'm gonna do so from my locals platform, where this should be going live. And we will do that after a few words about PU scopes. I'm going to start with the PU scopes momentarily. First, I will mention that I think the camera is canted, and it's going to push my OCD into absolute overdrive. Hold on. I have many, well, not that many, but a few positive qualities. This is not one of them. I think this is better, maybe. I don't know. Hopefully it's better. Where was I? Yeah, since PU is a Russian scope, I refuse to talk about it without some alcohol. So those who have been here for a while, you should have been ready. Cheers. Before you get any bright ideas, no, this is not vodka. I don't drink vodka. This is a nice Irish whiskey. It's the only peat heavy Irish whiskey I've ever tried. So I'm almost done with it. I've been slowly torturing this bottle for quite a long time. I think a couple more live streams and we're done. Not exactly a heavy drinker, to be honest with you. All right, what else? So a couple of, before I get moving, a couple of general purpose updates. I've talked a little bit about hunting. I posted a couple of range update videos. When I do my kind of a range day, range update videos, a lot of it is just to show you what I'm messing with right now. It's not going to be everything. It's going to be, you know, since I posted my last range day video, I went to the range 2 more times. But I couldn't record a video. It was just so windy, nothing would work. But they're fairly short videos. They're not super edited. Look carefully at what gear I'm using if you want more information about any one of them sooner than later. Well, that's where you can figure out what I have on hand and if you want me to talk more about it. Since we're in August, I'm sort of in a hunting season preparation to some degree. It looks like I may have talked myself into a pronghorn hunt here in New Mexico toward the end of this month. It's not 100% guaranteed yet, but it's a fairly high likelihood. And what I'm going to do with this pronghorn hunt, it's not going to require a huge amount of hiking. There may be some crawling, pronghorn being what they are. But what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to use the Stag Pursuit bolt gun that I've been testing in 6.5 PRC. I've been messing with it quite a bit. I've been trying different scopes on it. And it's an interesting rifle. It's basically, you know, neither target nor lightweight hunter in terms of weight. It's about 9 pounds empty. So I guess it's more like a varmint rifle, maybe. But it has a very, very comfortable stock, has an interesting cartridge, and it is quite accurate. I've tried a few different types of ammo. More or less everything shoots well with it. I am getting groups, so I'm sighting this thing in at about 200 yards. I'm getting comparatively consistent groups in about 1.5-inch range, so about 3/4 of an MOA. And that's about as well as I can shoot under normal conditions, right? So, and it's good enough. Hornady, for pronghorn, I'm going to take with me Hornady's 143 grain ELDX ammo. I have a few boxes of it. So I've been practicing with that. It basically launches that bullet at an average of 2,900 foot per second, which should be sufficient for my purposes. Mr. Chan, interesting, why are there we go. So the comments are on the screen now. Mr. Chen, is it Mr. Link or Mr. Chen? I'm not sure. Like, you have 3 names, and I don't know which qualifies as a first name, which qualifies as the last name. So I could use some clarification. Ammo cost, do you find ammo cost too high for 6.5 PRC? Yes. It is not a volume shooter. I'll tell you that. And to be fair, it probably doesn't have a barrel life of a volume shooter. But as a sheep or pronghorn cartridge, I think it is very viable. There's a good amount of wind out here in New Mexico, and something with a nicely efficient aerodynamic bullet, and that launches it comparatively fast and shoots flat is not a bad idea. I am planning to take a long-range class in Wisconsin toward the end of next month. And I will likely take a 6 ARC with me. I was going to go with 308, but somebody on my locals page suggested, I think it was Mr. Air Force retired Efrat, that I'd take 6 ARC. It's not a bad idea. I have my minifix almost converted to 6 ARC. I'm only waiting on a barrel. Should be here next week or so. And the big reason I'm doing that is that there's a little bit less recoil, but B, ammo is cheaper. And C, when you are traveling, the airlines allow you to take up to 11 pounds of ammo, and 11 pounds of 6 ARC is quite a bit lighter than 11 pounds of 308 or 6.5 PRC. About a week or so after I come back from the class, also in the very, very last few days of September and the first couple of days of October, I have a deer tag up in a northeastern part of New Mexico, up in near Clayton, Roy. If any of you are from around there and know where to look, I'm going to try to go scout. I'm going to do that. So one of the things I was doing in this range update video was getting my muzzleloader sighted in, and New Mexico changed its laws. Now muzzleloaders are iron sight only, and because muzzleloaders are iron sight only, I get a dubious honor of trying to remember how to shoot iron sights as you get older. Not always fun, but the iron sights I've got on my muzzleloader are absolutely exceptional. I'll talk about it more. And now that I've spent a little bit more time shooting with them, I'm cautiously confident that the chance of finding a deer in that unit are not good. If I find a deer, the chances of me being able to shoot it and hit it are pretty good. So, and let's see. Sometime this fall, I'm gonna go sneak out and go shoot some pigs in Texas. I'm not entirely sure when, but October is looking likely. Maybe earlier if I can do it, but October probably. And then that's largely it before the end of the year. In February, I have a Barbary sheep hunt, and I'm making arrangements for that. And for Barbary sheep, it's any rifle. I don't know for sure yet, but what I'm thinking of doing is either taking the same 6.5 PRC or quite possibly more likely a 6.5 Creedmoor. I am in the process of arranging for a 6.5 Creedmoor barrel for one of my fixed rifles. As I mentioned earlier, I want to shoot in the Burris Optics Challenge next year, and I'd like to use the fix for that. And the 6.5 Creedmoor is probably a very good compromise cartridge for a competition like that. The way we're thinking of doing it, my teammate is going to shoot semi-auto 6.5 Creedmoor, and I'm going to shoot a bolt gun in 6.5 Creedmoor so that we have the same magazine, same ammo. I think there is some value in that level of commonality. Okay. All right, I think we've got some people. We already even lost one or two. So let's talk about PU scopes. This is a PU scope. This is not the original. This is a replica. They usually came with these little leather collars, scope caps. They also usually come with a machined mount. This particular one, to the best of my knowledge, was made in Ukraine in the early 2000s. There was a factory in a place called Cherkasy, I think, not too far from Kiev. And they probably made what, other than the bearing scopes, that the article was about. Oh, that's actually a good point. I should probably tell you where the article is. There you go. So I do not reproduce it on my websites because I got paid to write it. I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. It was written for Greater Sports. A few people I'm friendly with own the company. They changed the name of the company more than once since it started. They seem to be doing well. They do kind of general goods, but they've done a lot with sporting optics and related things. Where was I? Yeah. So this is a Ukrainian replica, but it's a very, very faithful replica. The reason I wrote that article originally, there is this company called Bearing Optics, and most of us know it because of the thermals that they do. But before they did thermals, they imported all sorts of comparatively basic night vision rifle scopes and things like that from the former Soviet Union countries, from Russia and other places, Belarus and other places, and did a few things. And he wanted to do a PU scope, and he wanted to, he meaning the guy who owns Bearing Optics, so he's also originally from the Soviet Union, about my age, maybe he's a few years older, but not too much older. So I am not ethnic Russian, right? I grew up in the Soviet Union, I'm Jewish. He's an ethnic Russian, and he seems to have some national pride to some degree, and a lot of Russians do, that coming from all the business of World War II. And Russian culture is a separate conversation. And he just, for shits and giggles, he looked at all the different replicas of all these PU scopes that were mostly crap, and he just wanted to do the scope justice. He was able to go to St. Petersburg and find the original drawings and documents and everything for the scope. for the mount and all sort of stuff, and made essentially a perfect replica of a PU scope. The only difference, as I recall, my recollection may be wrong, but it's probably close. The only difference, as I recall, was that he used anti-reflection coatings on the lenses. The original PU obviously did not have any coatings of any sort. Aside from that, the bearing scope is a near as perfect of a replica of the original as I know of, and these Ukrainian ones from Cherkasy are actually very close. Very, very close enough. It's it's a fairly beefy scope. The original ones have steel tubes and stuff like that. It's a 3.5 power rifle scope with a 21mm objective. We all know these scopes as the dedicated optic for the Russian Mosin 9130 sniper rifles. It is probably the most mass-produced sniper rifle the world has ever seen. I once tried to figure out what the exact number is of these that was made. Mosin 9130 snipers. 9130 is a variant of that Mosin rifle, and the particularly accurate ones were selected and used as sniper rifles with this scope. It's at least 400,000, maybe 380 or so, but I think last time I tried to count, once you take into account some other Eastern Bloc countries that made them and used them, I think it's more than 400,000 rifles. It does. It is worth remembering, though, that the Soviet doctrine of a sniper was very, very different than Americans or Western militaries, or the way Western militaries think about snipers. In the Western militaries, we think about snipers, the two-man teams who do all sorts of stuff behind enemy lines and others. Shooting is just one part of it. With Soviet doctrine of sniping in World War II was greatly impacted by the German doctrine on precision shooting from World War I. During World War I, on the Eastern Front, German sharpshooters absolutely decimated Russian ranks and really made an impression on Russian soldiers. Interestingly, after World War I, when Hitler came to power and started rebuilding German military, they got rid of sharpshooters and snipers completely. I'm assuming it was Hitler's firm belief that the genetically superior German soldier is such a good shot you don't need specialized snipers. And Soviets, on the other hand, thought this was a good idea. And they had a ton of this. But most of these were what we would call designated marksmen. There were real snipers here and there with the same rifle. But most of it were people who were trained to shoot, who had rifles that were specially selected for being accurate, and they were very much embedded at platoon level or not at platoon level, actually at much smaller groups. And they absolutely wreaked havoc on high-value targets along with common soldiers. But officers, observers, artillery crews, etc., that was the biggest target for the Soviet sharpshooters. Excuse me. Mr. Northman is saying, I had a Mosin, I'm an idiot. I'm not entirely sure why those two statements are related. You may want to clarify that. What was I? So PU snipers were incredibly prolific. Finding an original one is not so simple, partly because there have been a ton of replicas of both rifles and scopes. And then quite a few regional Mosin snipers after World War II, when the rifles went in for refurbishment, quite a few of them were converted to normal configuration and normal 9130 configuration. If you look inside the receiver, you will see there are plugs where two holes were. I actually have two rifles like that, and I even bought correctly sized mounts for them at some point. I was going to restore them, but there's a long list of projects, and that's not at the top of the list. The original Mosin snipers started out in the 30s, before this scope existed. This scope was developed around 1940, 1939. And they used a different scope, a scope called PE in Russian designation. All right, Mr. Alpine just subscribed to my channel. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Not so, to my locals website. Thank you. Where was I? Yeah. So the original rifle scopes on Mosin snipers were the PE scopes, and they were basically a copy of a 3.71 magnification German Zeiss scope of the time. Something that does not get a ton of coverage is that before 1941, Germany and Soviet Union were allies. And there was quite a lot of cross-pollination of technologies between the two. Now Hitler and Stalin hated each other, but it seems like they hated the West a little bit more. Hitler always had plans to eventually attack Soviet Union because he thought that Russians are only useful as slaves. And Stalin also had plans to betray Germany and attack it because, well, Stalin hated pretty much everyone. It just so happened that Hitler beat him to the punch, and in 1941, Hitler invaded. Prior to that, in 1939, Soviet Union and Germany divided Poland, and prior to that, there was quite a few military advisors and things like that in the Soviet Union. And one of the things that they brought from Germany to Soviet Union in St. Petersburg, if I remember correctly, Zeiss helped Soviet Union set up manufacture of rifle scopes. German manufacturing and Russian manufacturing, not quite the same. Not quite the same attention to detail, not quite the same ability, etc. Soviet Union and Russia is kind of an interesting place. They can make perfect one of anything, sometimes two, but not three, and definitely not more. So if you want to make something in volume in Russia, it needs to be simple, robust, with very low tolerances. Otherwise, none of this shit's going to work. Case in point is probably the AK-47. It's a great gun. It's a great design, but it is also designed to be manufactured by untrained people, more or less, or by people who don't give a shit. Maybe trained but don't give a shit but untrained, and the vast majority are untrained and don't give a shit. That's just the reality of making things in Russia. So the PE scope, as manufactured in Russia, worked okay, but very few, comparatively few of them passed through quality control. The Russian engineers, who were much better than Russian assemblers and technicians, Russian engineers went and redesigned it a little bit to make it a little bit more robust and a little bit easier to manufacture, and that scope became PEM. Those scopes were mounted differently. They were mounted on the front bridge of the Action. Mosin has a split rear bridge, so this was a front bridge mounting. On the Action, I used to have one of those. Maybe I still do. If I do, I'll make a video, but I can't hold the rifle during this stream. YouTube is going to kill it. And it was a little bit longer, and it was optically quite nice. It had an adjustable eyepiece and all that. PEM was a little bit easier to make, but then Russian Soviet designers decided that they have this new semi-automatic rifle called SVT, so Tokarev's design, and that is going to be the general purpose infantry gun, and it's going to be a precision rifle, a sniper rifle. As we have learned with most designs, not all, but most designs, trying to have one rifle do everything gets a little bit tricky. We know that the AR-15 can be talked into it, all the Reese rifles and all that can be used as a little bit of everything. But that's a different kind of design made by different kind of technologies. Mr. Chad Fry, weren't you the guy who was asking me about PU scopes? Says he just bought a 1944 Ijevsk 1930, that's an ex-sniper, and got a bearing scope and mount, so I'll be converting the rifle back to a PU sniper soon. So if you're going to be converting it, look at the hole spacing in the receiver very, very carefully. The way there were three different mount sizes that were off by about 1 millimeter. Don't remember the actual sizes, but they were off by about 1 millimeter. That's the part that actually gets attaches to the receiver. The way those holes were plugged on Mosin guns, the plug is harder than the metal of the receiver around it. So you want to be able to drill out the plug perfectly through the center without crossing over into the actual receiver metal. So your base that you attach to the scope mount, to the receiver, needs to perfectly match the spacing between the holes. Mr. Guntotes in Minnesota is here. Howdy, sir. Yeah. But anyhow, good luck with the conversion process. Like I said, at some point I have 2 of those, and I have bases of matching length. I just haven't had the time to do it. I've heard a lot of horror stories about people trying to drill out those plugs, and it's no picnic. But let me know how it goes. Okay. Oh yeah, Mr. Northman is explaining why he's an idiot. He sold it. Yeah, you're selling rifles is generally not a good idea. Then again, I've done it a couple of times, and I've regretted almost every one of those. Well, that's also not true. Most of the guns I sold were different ARs when I went through my experimentation stage, when I've built every type of an AR-15 known to man. It took me quite a few to figure out which configuration I like, and a lot of the early ones were given away to different family members and sold. Be that as it may, going back to the whole business with Mosin guns, Soviet leadership decided that the semi-automatic automatic SVT is going to be their everything gun. It is the same kind of, in some ways, it was the same sort of a fallacy as an M14 in many ways. The Americans repeated that with the M14. They decided to make a fully automatic rifle with 308. SVT is a full automatic rifle, with 7.62 by 54R, which is ballistically in terms of power is very similar to 308. On full auto, in any sort of a normal weight of a gun, it was completely uncontrollable. On top of it, it was not super accurate, and the biggest problem they encountered is not uncommonly with Eastern Bloc semi-autos. The biggest problem they encountered was that the first shot was often 6 inches off at 100 yards, 5 inches off at 100 yards, then the subsequent shots. And this kind of a discrepancy for the first shot basically makes the rifle completely invalid as a sniper or DMR rifle, like that. The PU scope, as we know it, was originally developed for that SVT semi-automatic precision rifle project. And it had a very different mount. It mounted on this rear cover of the SVT. There were, about 40,000 of these made, and they look a little bit different. They have a little bit of a thinner tube in the back and stuff like that. But on the inside, optically, they're the same. Only the tube shape is a little bit different. The SVT project, so it was an SVT 40, I think, went on for a couple of years. From 1940, 1941, Germany attack, 1942, the whole SVT thing. SVT was actually a decent battle rifle, kind of like M14 was. It was not a great precision rifle, and nobody really used it on full auto, but as a semi-auto thing, it was a major advantage over most things that anybody had. There were quite a few pictures I remember of German soldiers walking around with captured semi-automatic SVT rifles. Maybe full automatic, but a shot in a semi-auto. In 1942, they finally gave up on this whole SVT sniper business. They were ramping up the production of Mosin 9130 rifles. And the 9130 design, other than a few earlier versions, changed the shape of the receiver. On the earlier Mosin snipers, the PE, PM snipers, most of them had hexagonal receivers. Then they changed to round ones. And then they were trying to figure out how to make these sniper rifles in large volumes. Like I told you, I think more than 400,000 were made. And they had this rifle scope. And the one huge advantage this rifle scope had over the early PEPM versions, since it was designed in Russia by Russian engineers, they made it really simple by optic standard. Surprisingly robust scopes. There are several different reasons for it. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it held up quite well. Interestingly, it served in its designated marksman sniper role until about 1960s. So they had a nice 20-year run in terms of being still manufactured and all that. And then it was, as a designated marksman, it was replaced by the SVD, the Dragunov rifle, Dragunov, that had a PSO 4x24 scope, a somewhat more modern scope design. I might have one here. Oh, yeah, I have one here. So just to show you, the scope that ended up going onto the Dragunov was this thing. It's not a great scope by modern standards, but it was an improvement over the PU. Okay, it was significantly bigger. It could do a lot more with optics. So this got replaced with this. However, the little PU, because there was so many of them, and because there were so many of them, and because they were so robust, for quite a few years afterwards, it remained in use as a machine gun optic on the 14.5 millimeter machine gun and stuff like that. So PUs were used by the Soviet military for quite a long time. They were still used as snipers and trainer rifles and all that for quite a long time. They were sent in large volumes to all sorts of different places that Soviets supported, and they were used in machine guns, I think, into the 80s. I mean, definitely late 70s, but probably into the 80s. The legacy of this PU scope, before I'll open it up and start, we'll talk a little bit about the construction. The legacy of the PU scopes is significant. There were quite a few of them ended up in Afghanistan, and one of the biggest reasons, arguably, that the American military decided to go with this new 6.8 millimeter cartridge. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think that's a good reason. I think as a general purpose cartridge, I think that's a mistake. But one of the biggest reasons is that there's a bunch of Afghani sheep herders, goat fuckers, whatever, with old Mosin guns, quite a few of them with these scopes, and sitting several hundred meters away out of the range of the AR-15s, and taking shots at US troops with these prehistoric rifles. Remember, Mosin gun was standardized in its original form in 1891. That's why it's called Model 91, and then it went through most variants, but by far the most prolific variant was the 9130. More than 2 million of them, maybe 2.5 million, were made during World War II, and they are freaking everywhere. It is not the prettiest gun in the world, etc. But if you look at the design very, very carefully, it is capable of decent accuracy. It's very easy to maintain. They freaking work. So, all right, there is a question from Gun-Toting Minnesotan. I know you're friendly with Swamp Fox. Are they still looking at the 40 millimeter tube optic? Other than internal adjustment, not sure the advantages of a 40 millimeter tube. Are there many more advantages optically? Interesting question. So we could talk about that a little bit later. I was under an impression that we're still working on it. I knew I wouldn't be able to tell you. All right. Let's see. PU scopes. Okay. Going back to PU scopes. Why is this thing robust? Well, they tried to make it robust. They were not trying to make it fancy. They were trying to make it sort of hold up. Because of a moderate magnification and compared to a narrow apparent field of view, maybe 16 degrees or so. Okay, I can look it up. Probably about 15, 16 degrees. There's not a ton you can do with this. It has a comparatively small number of optical elements. Actually, it's a good question. So here's a question for you guys. How many optical elements do you think this prehistoric rifle scope has inside? Before I pull a diagram up on screen, I'd like to see a few guesses. I know there are a few people watching. How many lens elements do you think are in here. While you are guessing, I am going to go and pull up the diagram, and I will show it to you in a couple of minutes. Okay, I think this is large enough. All right, so what are the guesses? So Mr. Northman is trying to answer the gun-toting Minnesotan. More precise adjustments, maybe. No, that's not the reason to have a 40mm tube. Drew Morgan says 8. Mr. Northman says 4. Mr. Cunbucket thinks 3. All right, anybody else want to venture a guess? How many lens elements are there in the PU scope that was designed in 1939? 1940. Nobody else feeling adventurous? Mr. Vipenkov says 3. 8, 4, 3, 3. All right, I want one more guess and I'll pop it up on the screen. Somebody has to be sufficiently adventurous. And please don't go looking it up. I want you to think about it. I'm curious now. I wonder if I put that diagram into the article. Okay, I did put the diagram into the article, so I guess might as well put it up on the screen because some of you are going to go cheat. Mr. PP archives options on burst eliminator 6 and reverse TPH and how they work. There's only one version of eliminator 6. And with the veracity, there are, I think, what, 3 or 4 models. Just, they have different radicals and magnification ranges. Not sure what options you mean. Please clarify. Okay. PP archive says 4. Mr. Chad Fry said 9. Link, Mr. Link. Still don't know if it's Mr. Link or Mr. Chan. Said 10. Okay. So let's count them. I started from the right from the eyepiece for shits and giggles. 1, 2, 3. You see my mouse, right? 3. That's the eyepiece. Then we go into the erector system. Erector system is just 4 lenses. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have 3 in eyepiece and 4 in erector. Okay, that's 7. And there are 2 more in the objective. It's a doublet, cemented doublet. So it's a total of 9 lenses. So who said 9 was correct? First name Link, last name Chen. Thank you, sir. So Mr. Chen. Yeah. I'm always confused with in Asian names. Oftentimes the order of last name, first name is reversed compared to what I'm used to. It says I don't have a feel for which is which by the sound of it. I ask. So did anybody say 9? So Drew Morgan said 8, and Link said 10. So you were both equally close. Okay. And that's a very prehistoric scope. I can pull up this diagram of a hand-sold rifle scope that I keep on showing. Their just objective lens system has 7. And with modern high erector ratio scopes like the 1:10s and 1:8s, the erector system alone can easily have between 6 and 8 lenses, maybe even more. I haven't looked at the most recent ones. Okay. So this is a picture from the original Russian document. As we all, and this is a little bit different from modern rifle scopes, and that difference is actually the thing that makes this silly scope so robust. Okay, so I'm gonna sketch out kind of in a very schematic way pieces, subsystems of a rifle scope, And that might help Mr. Kantbucket a little bit in his understanding how this works. I'm just looking for my piece of chalk. Green, yellow, white. Let's start with this guy. So I'm going to go from left to right. The objective is going to be on the left. Okay. Objective lens. I'm drawing it as one lens. I'm not going to draw a ton of lenses. Light comes in, gets focused somewhere here. That's the front focal plane. In an FFP scopes, this is where you'll have the reticle. Okay. Then okay. So from here to here, the second focal plane is going to be somewhere here. In the second focal plane, this is where you would have the reticle. Okay. So this is where the erector system is. In this scope, the erector system has 4 lenses. I'm just going to draw them as also 4 lenses. Like, 2 lenses, cemented to each other. In a variable riflescope, these 2 will move with respect to each other. And then there will be some lenses here, something like that, in the eyepiece. Okay. So objective, erector, eyepiece. Is it all making sense? Okay. So Mr. Northman is asking, is it precise? Does it track and hold 0? Well, there was sold 400,000 of these made. So I'm sure not all of them track and hold 0. But the better quality ones I've seen, actually not bad. Within my ability to shoot, with this kind of a reticle. If you've never seen what this reticle looks like, let's do an experiment and see if I can get this thing. I was wanted to see if I can do it. There we go. It's a very crude number 1 type reticle. Okay. I'm gonna do something a little bit different. Rather than stretch out toward the camera, I'm gonna try to do this. There you go. Should be able to see it a little bit. That's what the reticle looks like. This reticle is not ideal for precision shooting. So within my ability to shoot with this scope and with this reticle, it tracks well enough. I have hit plates out to 800 yards with the Mosin gun and with this scope. Took a little bit of work, but once I figured out what the adjustment level is, so the way the elevation turrets was done here, it's essentially BDC to 1200 meters, which is very optimistic. And the ballistically, it's not a perfect match to what we shoot and where we shoot it. So there was some experimentation, but it has a 0 stop. There are no clicks. There are friction dials. There is a little notch here that stops at 0, so you can always go back to 0, right? And then there are markings on there. Once you figure out which is which, I found it was quite consistent. Okay. Mr. Chen, where is the reticle on the PU scope? So right here. And this is where things get interesting. With all of the modern scopes that we have, we are used to having the reticle always be in the center of the image, right? Yes, that all makes sense? You with me? Mr. Kyle is here late to the party, excuse me. Absolutely. Anytime. Okay. Where was I? Yeah. So in all of the modern scopes, we are used to having the reticle be centered in the image. In the PU and in many older scopes like that, it wasn't. Come back. Wait, there's a 0 stop in all PU? What the fuck? Okay, let me see if I have a better picture of it to put on a screen. If I don't, I'm gonna find a way to show it to you on a scope I have in hand. Okay, this should be it, I think. No, not this one. But this one, I don't have a good angle. I had, I'm looking at the pictures I took for that article 9 years ago, and I had a ton of scopes here with a specific turret that I wanted to show you. I don't see that one. Maybe we'll just find a way to show you here. It's very rudimentary, zero stop, but it works. Remarkably, surprisingly well. No, okay, I'm gonna have to just show you. Alrighty, I'm gonna do the same basic thing. I was going to set up an overhead camera, and that would have been good for this, but I didn't for a variety of reasons. None of them good. Alright, so let's see. So there is a pin sticking out of the base of the turret. I'm going to refocus on it. There we go. See, there is a pin here. Let me point at it with a pencil. There's a pin here. And this little go back to 0, there is a notch extension that goes against the pin. So you can adjust it in this direction. That's to shoot at longer distances. When you go back, you dial it back until the little drum stops on a pin. So it's a basically prehistoric zero stop. But when you start shooting with the scope, one of the things you find is that it's a crude but a surprisingly clever design. Right, let me refocus it on where we were. All right, this is roughly where my face was, right? I swear by next live stream I'll have the overhead camera set up. All right. Am I in reasonable focus? You see my ethereal beauty? I'm gonna go with a yes, for those of you not vomiting right now. Okay. So here is one of the differences, Mr. Carl is going, Gunny Heathcock shot through an early PU scope and hit an enemy sniper in the eye. The Cobra. People have reenacted it and proved it too. Zaraskis got caught lying about Koenig versus Zaitsev. Or was it the Cobra? I think the Cobra was a woman. One of the multiple snipers the Gunny and his team got back when the rifle was warped and all that. So I don't remember for sure. I think somebody tried it. I find it incredibly unlikely that anybody put a bullet through the PU scope. What more than likely happened, Gunny Heathcock saw a reflection of the front element of the scope and shot at it successfully. Okay. So that's my best guess. And that's why the round went through the scope, not a lot of lenses or internal parts. Okay. Looking at this diagram, is it completely, absolutely impossible? No. Is it improbable to the point where I call bullshit? Yes. And for a variety of different reasons, there is enough internal parts here. And at any sort of reasonable range, the bullet is already coming down to go through it. The impact it's horseshit. It doesn't matter, it was still a good shot and makes for a really cool story. So where was I? Yeah, in all the modern rifle scopes, what you have is a centered reticle. And the centered reticle is simply due to the fact that here you see the erector lenses. All right, there you go. So you see it. These 4 lenses in the middle. Cargo Steve Reichert repeated it on the History Channel. I'll have to look it up. Since it was on the History Channel, yeah, they're lying. But regardless, it doesn't matter. Not critical. the erector lenses in the PU scope are fixed in place; they don't move. In a conventional rifle scope, like what we have these days, so these erector lenses sit in a separate tube. That's kind of a tube within a tube thing, and I'll draw the turrets. I drew the turrets in the wrong place. The turrets usually sit over the front of the tube, roughly. Okay. And the way this works, the tube, as you rotate the turrets, the whole tube moves up and down. And the reticle is fixed to the front of the tube. Most of the reliability problems with modern rifle scopes come from this movement of the reticle, of the erector system. Right, that's where we have most of our issues. In old scopes like the PU, the erector lenses were fixed in place. Down here, I think it's, yeah, see the number 4? That's the frame of the reticle. The reticle is right here. Excuse me, right here. Okay. And when you adjust the turret, it is the reticle that moves. And that's why when you twist the turrets, you see the reticle move within the field of view, right? So in order to sight it in so that the reticle was reasonably close to the center at your 0, the way the side mount was designed, it allowed for some adjustment. Fortunately, I couldn't find it. Somewhere still stored after my move from California. The way the base of this works, there are 2 screws that can go externally adjust up and down. And there is a pad on the back here that you could file down to get it set up laterally. So in principle, each scope was optimized for a specific rifle. Once you got it fairly close, from there, when you turn the dials, the reticle moved within the field of view. But the moving piece was just a reticle cell, which is very light. So it has very little inertia. And if the scope is at least marginally decently built, there's very little moving. Eyepiece is not adjustable, objective is not adjustable, everything is held in place. Erector system is, and you can see, is held by some comparatively beefy mechanical pieces, right? Once it is all aligned, it's pretty freaking robust. And the one thing that moves, the reticle, is so light that it's not especially sensitive to recoil. There used to be a guy in, I don't know, I think he was in Australia. He was an older gentleman. And he, a few years ago, went on a whole campaign that we need to go back to making the rifle scopes in the same style as these old ones, in order to make them more robust. There's some logic to it. I don't think we're ever going to go back. Non-centered reticle is moderately annoying, but it's not, from a pure reliability standpoint, it's not an unsound point. Okay, Mr. Gunter to Minnesota, what is the parallax fixed at for a distance on that one? I think it was 150 meters, but I think I have that. Let me see. Give me 1 second. I had a spec sheet somewhere here that should have the focus distance. No, because it's low magnification and compared to the long f numbers, it has very large depth of field. So it is, I am inside a room here. I have, right, I mean, at a distance, that's, I don't know, 5 yards from me, everything is surprisingly decent focus. But I wonder what they set it to. I would guess they probably set it to about 150 meters or something like that. And mostly because when you were talking about the depots where these were set, that was probably the distance. But it didn't have to be. United States military put together, U.S. Army Ordnance issued, admittedly a while back, in the 50s or something, a user manual for the PU scope, since that was the enemy's scope. And I am trying to see if they had any focus distance set. Nope. No, I don't see it. Probably fairly conventional, but once again, there is depth of field on this thing is very large, and I would not be terribly concerned about focus distance. Okay, Kyle, what gen is the scope? How many generations were made? Maybe some history. So I gave you a little bit of history prior to that. And this particular scope, as I told you guys, is a replica from a place called Cherkasy. Of the originals were about 400,000 made. They, hold on. I know I have it. There we go. So I did not bother to memorize every possible generation because depending on the availability of parts, there were quite a few versions inside. They're all more or less the same. On the 9130.info website, there is a very nice rundown of all the different versions with stems and everything, if that's something you care about. I'm not really a retro guy. I find the scope interesting because of a few things about it that we're discussing. But other than that, I don't know a huge amount about different versions. I've seen several, but that's pretty much it. I'm going to put a link in the chat box. If you're curious about different versions, it's going to be there. And if you are curious about the conceptualization of it, how it came about, where and all that, you'll probably need to go back and rewatch the beginning of this live stream. I spent some time on that. Okay. Kyle, I came late. Excuse me. No, I'm glad you're here. I just don't want to repeat the same thing that other people have been listening for the last half hour. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, scope robustness. Mr. Link, Mr. Chen, excuse me. Why no more modern scope use this design anymore? Because when the reticle is not centered in the field of view, it's a little bit annoying. That's probably the biggest reason. Also, because we went to variable scopes. If you're having a variable scope, you need the pieces inside to move with respect to each other, so you cannot use this exact design. On the other hand, it could be potentially interesting to make a slightly modernized version of a fixed power that with a design like this. Honestly, if you think about it, the legacy of rifle scopes like the PU and a lot of these early, very, very robust and comparatively simple. Again, I'm saying comparatively simple. This is simple compared to modern scopes, but there's still some work went into this, right? The single biggest reason why this sort of a design is never going anywhere, never come back, is I should have one here. Oh, there. It is rifle scopes like this. Okay. Let's get back to this. The single biggest reason why we'll never see scopes like of that design as a PU here is this. This is a 3-power Burris prismatic that is shorter, much shorter, easier to make, has illumination, all the different modern features, very robust, offers wider field of view, is lighter, almost the same magnification. This is a 3-power, this is 3.5, but there are 4 and 5-power tiny prismatics, right? If you can have this, other than nostalgia and stuff like this, why would you want this? Right? Low power, low magnification, fixed power designs are significantly, utterly, and justifiably, except for a few very odd combinations like long action dangerous game rifles, are dominated by modern prismatics, and the modern prismatics are very good. The downside, of course, of modern prismatics is that all of the moderately inexpensive ones are all Chinese, right? And you can have feelings about that. I'm not here to pass judgment, but the product stands on its own merit. And modern prismatics are seriously good. There is a reason I've spent so much time and effort in all of these. Okay. Interesting question. Mr. Drew Morgan, how many elements in a prism optic like that? Link goes, I guess 5. Well, it doesn't have to be. It can be a different number. So the difference in terms of the design between a prismatic and a conventional rifle scope is basically in the erector. The eyepiece conceptually is the same. The objective conceptually is the same. But instead of the erector, you have a prism. And there have been some designs that the prism and the lens, but all the modern good ones are just the prism. And the prism is typically, it's a roof prism, so it's 2 pieces. So it's whatever lens elements you have in objective plus whatever lens elements you have in the eyepiece and 2 pieces of a roof prism. I think saying ACOG has 6. Quite possible. I think I had a diagram of the ACOG somewhere. Let's see. No, that's something else. I did a live stream a while back, and I kind of showed the DLO live episode 15 was modern prismatic scopes, so there's probably some stuff in there that would show you the diagram. I don't have it on hand. I can probably dig it up, but it's going to take more time than it's worth. Kyle, one of these PU scopes variations had a range estimator and an eye cup. Wasn't this issued on a Dragunov too, not just SVT-40s and Mosin guns? So there was a small number of these that were, after Dragunov was introduced, were modified. Most of them were used on a machine gun. To the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, they were never an issue optic on a Dragunov, but they did have a side mount for it. And the side mount could have been used on a Dragunov, could have been used on an AK. That was a comparatively modern thing. I think it was done a little while back. I think I've seen a picture of one of these PU scope with a special AK SVD style side mount made, but I can't remember. I don't think it was ever issued. Russia being Russia, everything gets moved around, so I would not be surprised if you can find a picture of it in a Dragunov if you look hard. There we go. I found a picture. Let me share it with you. That's from that web page that I just shared with you. So yeah, there is a, and this is an SVD type style side mount, and they did have a version of it that held the PU. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so the scope was exactly identical, and they just had an aluminum ring on it in the back. It's not an eyepiece, it's just so that the standard rubber eye cup would be able to go in there. Okay. There it is. Okay. I think that's the one you're talking about. So most of them, after introduction of Dragunov, were used on machine guns, on a 14.5 Dushka and on all sorts of other fun stuff. Okay, so, all right, let me have some water. Mr. Northman is talking about 40mm Swamp Fox. Bigger objective lens, better light transmission, bigger exit pupil. So 40mm refers to the main tube diameter. The objective on that scope is 56 millimeters, so the light transmission is not going to be impacted. Tube diameter doesn't have anything to do with light transmission over the exit people. Gun-toting Minnesotan. Do you think the PU scopes would be Springer rated? So looking at the design, they probably would, but I honestly don't know. PP archives. I meant opinions on Illuminator 6 and various TPH and how they work, the technology, etc. I've spent quite a lot of time with both in June. I think they are, in terms of capabilities and what you can do, a massive step forward. I intend to review the Illuminator 6 this year sometime. I intend to review the Veracity PH when there is a mill-radiant version available. Both are quite excellent. I've talked about it a little bit. Illuminator 6 is a massive step forward optically compared to the predecessor. I've spent some time shooting fairly far away with it. It did work exceptionally well. Mr. Northman, it's killing me. Anyway, keep going. What's killing you? Not me. Hopefully, I don't know what. Okay, anybody knows what's killing Northman? I'm genuinely confused, but that's a fairly normal thing for me. Or was that just Mr. Northman poking fun at me, knowing that I start going up the wall when people talk about high light transmission with larger objective tubes? If this is the case, I thought better of you. All right. Kyle. So this would make a badass Mosin scope for a Zaitsev-inspired clone. Yes, it would. It most certainly would. Once again, so as I said in that article, the best of the replicas that I've seen was that bearing scope, but they made it in Russia and St. Petersburg, so I doubt, since the war started, I don't think they can get anything out of Russia. So I'd be surprised if they're available other than the second-hand market. The second best, I think, was this guy, which was made in Ukraine, but again, Ukraine is busy now, so they have other problems, so I don't think you'll be able to get that one either. I have one more somewhere sitting, I think, on one of my 22s, something like that. It was a very different replica made in Taiwan, and that one I think had a centered reticle, so it just looked like a PU, but inside it was like a simple full power scope. So, Mr. Pew archives. I'm both second focal plane. I'm used to first focal plane. Both what? Which scopes are you referring to? Because we've kind of mentioned several here, so I'm curious if there's a particular one you're thinking of. Let me see, is the video still working or not? Hopefully it's working. If not, I'll turn it back on. So far so good. Okay. Alonzo Kincaid, how does the Colt Seymour compare? Colt Seymour, are you talking about that prehistoric Colt for power scope? B&H has the bearing scope on stock. Wow, must be some old stock. Very cool. They do, I'll be damned. $329. Well, it's a very faithful. So it's a very faithful replica of a piece of history. If you are trying to do a traditional looking Mosin sniper, again, this is going to be a replica, not an original. I'm going to put a link in the chat box. This is a very nice option. Thank you for pointing it out. I had no idea somebody actually had it in stock. Very cool. PP archives. Both second focal plane scopes, Illuminator 6 and Veracity. So Illuminator 6 is a second focal plane scope, but the way it works, they deal with it. You don't use it like a... You have to use the Illuminator like you use the Illuminator, right? It's not... You can't think of it the same way. You shoot a laser, it looks up the ballistics, and it basically tells you what to do. You're not using it in the same way you would use a more conventional scope, if you wish. I think that makes sense. The Veracity PH is a little bit different. It is a more conventional scope, except it has that heads-up display inside. And because it has that heads-up display inside, you never have to look away from the scope, which I think for me is a huge advantage. But if all the batteries die, you have a perfectly reasonable front focal plane scope to use. So, all right, we are about an hour and 10 minutes into it, and we still haven't gotten to any questions from Mr. Cunt Bucket. If you are still here, you want to go over them, please put something in the chat box. I'm going to drink some water, and we can go over your questions real quick. Let me find where they are, and I'll start looking. Okay, I think I found the questions. Okay, I am going to assume Mr. Conbuck is still here. I'll put the questions up on the screen and go through them relatively quickly just to see what's what. Okay. I wonder if I can make it. Chat Fry, quick question: the PU scope mount, are the holes drilled on a 2-3 degree down angle? I am not sure. I don't think so. I think they're supposed to be straight and not at an angle. But if it's 2 or 3 degrees, I might not notice. So I don't know. There was a guy, there's a Russian guy in Chicago, I think. He had a website called Accumount something. Let me see if he still exists. It's been so long. And he also sold regular replica scopes and things like AccuMounts.com, reproduction, sniper scalp mounts and accessories. And I vaguely recall that he actually knew quite a lot about the mounts, and he had mounts way back when from in different sizes. He's also the guy who's had a centered reticle replicas and stuff like that. Okay, AccuMounts.com. There you go. The website still exists. I have not bought anything from him in many years, so I don't know how reliable it is. I'm going to put it in the chat box, and we'll go from there. So he might know more about it, if there's an angle or not. All right. So, Mr. Cuntbucket's questions. He's still here, enjoying the mini seminar. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Just this page. I can a little bit, but it doesn't give me what I was looking for. But should make it bigger. All right. Radical stuff. In the FFP variable scope, does the internal lens refract light in a way as to maintain these angles, or does it require additional components to do so? This should refer to the angular measurements needed to maintain accuracy of the reticle on all variable optics, but especially FFP. I have no idea, not the slightest, of what you mean. Okay, So I'll let you try to rephrase it a little bit. All right. Mr. Piperka is asking me if I know anything about Novus Precision PDS1 Prism Dot. Not first I hear it. Let me see. Maybe everything comes out of there comes out with different names. Novus Precision. I don't know what that company is. The fuck? Oh, that's ugly. Oh, I have never seen this thing before. It's very interesting. Every time some company comes up, it says it's founded by a team of optics engineers and firearm experts. Novus aims to deliver robust, reliable aiming devices, yada, yada, yada. Most of what they have is a standard Chinese scopes. This one probably is as well. The company appears to be new, 2024. Interesting. I don't see. Does anybody know where they're located? Yeah. I don't know. I have never heard of Novus Precision until today. So, don't know. All right, Mr. Convact. Number one is based on my misunderstanding of the scope internals. Yes. I thought there was a moving lens inside of variable optics that might mess up the angles needed to make the reticle accurate. So there is actually in some scopes, not all. In high magnification scopes that have side focus, let me find a different color and add something to the diagram. So I'm gonna go back so you can see the blackboard. So in modern scopes that have side focus, there are some extra lenses here, right? There's also a small reticle cell here. We call it the focus cell. There are between 2-3 lenses here usually. And this is the thing that moves front and back when you adjust side focus. It moves in and out a little bit. And on some scopes, depending on how those lenses are positioned, the reticle may be slightly off. I think there is a guy, Michael something, Italian last name, who works for Leopold, who is going around and telling the world that every scope has a reticle card at 100 yards because they set it up at 500 or 600. Leopolds do, right? So Mark V's are reticle and all of them is slightly off at 100 yards. Because when the focal length, effective focal length of the objective lens system is not supposed to change when the focus lens moves. On Leopold Mark V's, it actually changes slightly. So the reticle subtensions are not perfect at 100 yards. They seem to be dead on 500 or 600 yards, something like that. On most well-designed rifle scopes, the movement of the focus cell does not change the effective focal length perceptibly, and the reticles should stay accurate. If it's a front focal plane reticle, the movement of the lenses behind in the erector system does not make any impact on the accuracy of the reticle subtensions. However, if the objective lens system is not designed sufficiently well, the adjustment of the turrets can make the reticle subtensions look off when you're near the edge. It's not super common on nice scopes, but I see this on cheap scopes all the time. Essentially, a objective lens system is supposed to be creating this image in the front focal plane. It's basically a large circular image, okay? And the front of the erector tube is much smaller than that. And this is where the reticle is, okay? When you start dialing the turrets, you are pushing down on the front of the erector tube, and the reticle can end up near the edge if you've maxed out the adjustments. And what happens here, this large image circle, that objective lens, if it's not perfectly corrected, meaning zero distortion, etc., then the subtensions when you're at the edge can be slightly different than the subtensions when you are in the center. The reticle did not change, but the image may have some pincushion or distortion or something like that. Not super common, but it is possible. Okay. Kyle, that was DCO, not Leopold. No, that's Leopold. It's Michael something, and he's a Leopold guy, starting with B. He's apparently a pretty good shooter, but he doesn't understand anything about optics, while Leopold lets him out to talk about optics is a mystery to me. Because he's talking to people who understand less than he does, and he's speaks with great authority, as these guys usually do. But I don't think he knows what he's talking about, at least not in any way that I can comprehend. It sounds like he goes to Leopold engineers that tell him something, and he understands it in whichever way he wants to understand it. And the result is that he is perpetuating mostly nonsense. Michael Baccellieri, something like that. He's actually a subscriber on my local's website, but I sent him an email once. Because when I saw his name pop up, he never replied, so I don't know. Okay. Alonso Kinkin, ZCO, no good. No, ZCO scopes are very good. Okay. Chad Fry, thank you for the great information. It is late over here in New Jersey, so I'm jumping off. Спокойной ночи. Yeah, good night to you too. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the PU question. I completely forgot I wrote that article. When you brought it up, I thought that maybe it's worth talking about it for a little bit. Okay. All right, let's go back to Mr. Conbucket's questions and see if I can. Okay, so this one is worth touching on a little bit. Does the effect of previous question explain how some scopes reticles don't match MOA milliradian grids as well as others? Or is that simply a matter of QC and stacking tolerances? It's mostly a matter of QC and stacking tolerances. There are occasionally some design issues, but usually it is QC. I mean, everything is manufactured by humans. Lenses are manufactured. Reticles are manufactured. They all need to be manufactured to spec, right? If some lens curvatures in objective lens are not quite right, the image size in the front one is going to be slightly off, and the reticle may not be sized perfectly for it. Remember, some physical size in the reticle corresponds to some angular projection from the objective lens. Most of it is just QC and things like that. Question number 3. I've noticed an increase in BDC reticle options on high magnification scopes around 20 power. I love the concept of a BDC, but it seems to be somewhat detrimental at the distances one would use that magnification for. How are they becoming so prevalent when the ballpark approach is rarely accurate? Figuring out your holds and taping the turret is still a more effective solution for accuracy. You're absolutely correct. So I will go on the record. I've said this before. I think BDC reticles and high magnification scope is a stupid fucking idea. However, it sounds simple on paper, and people who buy scopes but don't use them, remember, vast majority of people who buy a 20 power scope with a BDC reticle never shoot past 100 yards, right? So they like the idea of having a BDC because they think it makes them more capable at longer distance. But since they never actually use it, they don't know that it's a bad idea. Long range is not quite for BDC reticles. The one exception to it is David Tubbs' DTR system, which is sort of a BDC reticle, and it really works. But it's a whole, integrated system, right? It's a different ballgame. There's a reason, right? So I'm very fond of the guys at Primary Arms, very friendly with quite a few of them there. But the ACSS reticles on high power scopes just don't work for me. I'm not aware of a single one that I find to be useful. Now, if I had something else, I'd use it. I don't think they do them correctly, but they sell in droves, right? So from a sales standpoint, excuse me, to blow my nose, I'll mute myself. You don't want to listen to that. The neighbors claim that me blowing my nose sounds like an elephant pissed off. Where was I? Yeah. So it clearly sells, but I do not know any marginally serious shooter who uses BDC reticles on high magnification scopes. BDC reticles have their use. I'm still not a huge fan, but I use them in prismatics or low power variables, basically scopes that go into AR-15s. With a relatively standardized cartridge where it may not be perfect, but it's going to be close enough. For anything remotely resembling precision, hunting precision, etc., BDC reticles are just a bad idea. And if you have a high magnification scope, it's just a terrible idea. Okay. I hope that tells you what I think on the subject. All right. Let's see. Link. I would expect anything around 1.5K coming against Razor Gen 3 6-36, like we have seen before, like the Track Delta Athlon going after the Razor Gen 2. I'm not aware of anything on the horizon that will cost $1,500 and compete with the Razor Gen 3. I assume that 6-36. It doesn't mean there isn't anything, it just means that I'm not aware of it. Now, a lot of people will come out and claim it. I think Arkin just came out with some 7-35 or something, or somebody else, and they will all claim it, and it's going to be mostly horseshit. Not that it's impossible, but it's unlikely. Mr. Gunto to Minnesotan. I take shooters every month to test out their gear. Almost every BDC reticle becomes such a disappointment. Every single guy has sold their BDC scope and gone meals. Rightly so. Correct. BDC reticles have their use. Precision shooting is not one of them. And I'll drink to that. Minnesota is one of the few. I've been, I think, to 46 or 47 states. I have not been to Minnesota. Maybe I should go. But then again, I just learned about your governor. It would make no sense to run away from California just to go to Minnesota. Alonzo Kincaid, top 5 high-end scope manufacturers. Mr. Alpine 411 is going, I'm trying to figure out how to join the live chat. I'm technologically challenged. You are in a live chat. I mean, you're posting from Rumble. I'm not entirely sure what you're trying to accomplish. Seems to be working fine. You're able to post a comment. Kyle, Apex Scopes has a Night Force-ish scopes. Apex scopes are made by Japan Optics Limited. They have a very decent 40-32x56. And Night Force is made by Light Optics Works, so it's a little bit different. Yeah, I'm familiar with Apex. Mr. Alonso Kincaid, top 5 high-end scope manufacturers. So it's not ideal to talk about manufacturers because different models are different. My favorite overall is Tangent 8. I've got 3 of them. They're remarkable scopes. I really like the 2 new Schmidts I tested, 6-36, 3-18. And I've got some fun new stuff coming. Z-Comp is very good. I'm very fond of March. March is very good. And but honestly, if you are shopping for a high-end scope and price somewhat measures, Vortex Razor Gen 3 is a true alpha scope in many ways, except it's a little bit less expensive. Kyle, well, we know he won't say loophole. Well, not necessarily. So I actually like loopholes. I like the Mark 5s and I like the Mark 4s. For the money, I actually like the Mark 4s more. I have 2 of them right now, 2.5 to 10 by 42, and a 4.5 to 18 by 52. I like them enough that I think I'm going to take the 4.5 to 18 on a pronghorn hunt with me. If assuming it comes off, that's in about 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks. Leupold does not currently make a truly high-end scope. Mark 5 is a good scope, but it's not an alpha scope. It's a step behind. So Night Force. Night Force is very good. I think Night Force. So Attacker is a good scope, but I think Razor Gen 3 is better and a little bit less expensive. Night Force does have great marketing, and they do make nice, robust scopes. But Night Force, basically, I like the Attacker scopes, not a huge fan of everything else. So. Mr. Gunto to me says, hey, we aren't proud of that, Governor. The metro controls the rest of the state. 40 miles of the state controls 400 miles that don't think anything like them. Yeah, it is unfortunately the situation in many places. Alonso, what about the Mark 6? Mark 6 is not made anymore, and it's just in small quantities for the military. It's not made for civilians. And Mark 5 is a better scope than the Mark 6. Not by a small margin. It's a notably better scope. Mark 6 had issues. Going back to the questions. Why aren't more MPVOs and even LPVOs offered with simple hash reticles having elevation and windage? As much as I love the GPO 1.5 to 9 with the G4i drop reticle, I really wish it had windage marks as well. I wish I knew. To me, it's a glaring gap in the market. But the problem with MPVO scopes, medium power variable optics, is that they're kind of in a no man's land. Remember, most scopes are bought by people who barely ever use them. And they're bigger cells, and these do not look impressive on paper. They're very useful scopes, and I really like them. I know there are a couple of decent ones coming up soon, so hopefully that situation will get rectified. Let's see. I think I missed a question there. All right. I really dig the staggered subtension indicators on the optoscope reticles. Do you think that will become a more common arrangement? It's a nice amount of information without being cluttered like some of the tremor-based offerings. It refers to the Optical 6 5-30 by FFP with MRAD RD reticle. I'm glad you like my reticle. I designed that one for Opta. The staggered numbers, I assume that's what you mean. The numbers were staggered on two sides. It was kind of my experiment to see if I like it or not. I'm a little mixed on it. But on balance, I prefer more symmetric numbering. So what I found myself liking is that basically just do even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. on the two sides of the tree. And I've made several different variants of that. I'm still trying to figure out which exact arrangement I like the most, but that seems to work better for me than staggered. Kyle, VX HD series and the Mark 8s were high-end and always lighter. Yeah, Mark 8 was a legitimate high-end scope, but not made anymore. VX5 and VX6 are good scopes. I would not call them high-end, but they're good scopes. Mr. Alonso Kincaid is trying to get me to say top 5 shit hit the fan LPVOs. Okay. I don't like to do top 5s, but I'll do it this one time. Schmittenbender, DLCC 1-8, Razor Gen 3 1-10, Primary Arms, PLXC Compact. I really like the second focal plane version. I've been playing with it. Front focal plane is a nice scope, but the reticle annoys me a little bit. Second focal plane, both are very nice. So, Psi 6 1-6. I've got 3 of these scopes. Like them a lot. I think they work really well. And Night Force LPVO. So I think NX8 is a steaming pile of manure. Attacker is a good scope, but I really don't like how they constricted the field of view on low power. I think that's detrimental to the way low power variables work. So I don't know what the 5th one would be. If you ask which LPVOs I have and use, and remember, I can use damn near anything I choose, right? So what do I have and use? I have Psi 6 1-6, Primary PLXC second focal plane 1-8. I have Delta Striker 1-10 by 28. That's more of a general purpose LPVO since it has side focus. I have a Razor Gen 3. So these are the general LPVOs that I use. Many different low power variables come here and go. These stay. So make your conclusions. Alpine, love your content, but I don't know if I'm on a live chat. Yes, you are on the live chat. Thank you, sir. Okay. Gunto to Minnesota. Do you prefer steadier numbers to be placed right next to the center post or at the end of the windage markers? I can explain better if not good. No, I know what you mean. Good question. And it kind of depends on how you like them. I don't like them right next to the vertical. And I don't like them all the way on the edges if the tree goes wide. I've been for different, I design reticles for different people. I've been doing some experiments for different people, trying to see what I like. And honestly, for my own personal use, I'm kind of leaning toward I like to embed them into the tree about 3 milliradians away from the vertical, roughly. And that seems to be where I like them the most. I don't know if it will be commercially successful. We'll see. At some point, I'll need to go and take a careful look and see if other people like this approach as well. I've made a couple of reticles that style, and I like them. Okay. Alonzo Kincaid, what's wrong with NX8? Laughter. Quite a few things. Primarily because it's $1,800 and optically it's shit. iBox is tight, image quality above 5 goes to shit. Not that great on one either, but okay. And it's an older design, field of view is narrow. It has the size and weight going for it, but Primaris PLXC is even lighter, almost same size. So I don't know. Look, honestly, if Vortex's AMG 1 to 10 was available to the public, I'd have a couple of those. Other than that, if I had to just use one low power variable, it would be the Razor Gen 3. But I did have mine set up for a longer focus distance than the standard. So. Kyle, LPVOs all have bad low power field of view, hence ACOG and Elkan Spectra. Huh? I think you're going to have to explain this to me. So the idea behind low power variables is that they go on 1 power, and they have nice and wide and flat with nice ones field of view, so you shoot with both eyes open. ACOGs are single power. Elkan is indeed dual power, but the field of view is not a huge reason for it. If I remember correctly, the field of view of the Elkan on 1 power was very, very good, about like 140 feet or something like that. So a little bit wider than most LPVOs, if memory serves me right. But the biggest reason for the Elkan is not really the field of view. And I like Elkan. I have the fixed 4 power Elkan, love it. It's not really the field of view per se, it's the fact that you have 2 different powers in a single package and it's short. And modern guns that have shorter barrels have a bunch of comparatively limited rail space, you have to have a bunch of crap on it. There is an advantage of having shorter scopes. That's why Vortex designed the AMG 1 to 10 to be very, very short. That's really the reason. So. Nathan, is it just me, or does the SIG Tango 6T series really dubious quality control? So honestly, I haven't looked at one in quite a few years. I tested when this, I don't know. I tested a few that were good, but it's been a while, maybe. Kyle, nitrous scopes have been used to drop a lot of bad guys. That is very true. They are nice scopes. I'm not saying they're bad scopes. I find the whole crowd of Night Force shit doesn't stink a little bit odd. They're nice scopes. They have their uses. They do really well. Attackers are nice scopes. I think they're overpriced to support Night Force marketing budget, and they have certain features that I don't particularly like. If you start talking about which scope dropped the most people, this is probably the best scope in the world. There's a really high probability that more people have been killed by rifles equipped with this scope than all other optics likely put together, right? So it's, I don't think that's a good argument. Nathan, no, the AMG. I wish the NGSW FC, that's the XL158, was for sale. Even without the military stuff, integral mount may be neat. Yeah, if you want that scope, you want the military stuff. Drew Morgan, the size 6 Milred is interesting. Had not heard of it. By the way, Mr. Cunt Bucket, we have a ton of questions, and I think I want to go through the questions. I know we didn't finish with all of your stuff on the YouTube, and I'll do this again in the next live stream. Maybe I'll do a shorter one on Monday or something like that. I have a self-imposed limit in around 19 minutes. So I want to make sure we do the questions in the comments, and then I know where I stopped, and I will finish going over your questions. Drew Morgan, size 6 Milleradian is interesting. Had not heard of it. I have two of them. One with the rapid aiming features, and one without it. I like these scopes. They are really interesting. If you look at them on paper, they don't look like anything super special. When you use them, it's a very cohesive thing. It just everything comes together. They're easy to use. They work well. Everything looks good. Everything works. I've got 3 of them: the regional BDC and 2 Milleradian ones. I like them. They work. Gun-toting Minnesotan. Are you familiar with the Zero Tac 5-30 they just came out with? Wondering if this is just the old Optics Works design with updated glass. Curious to see it in person. Price point is a bit up there, probably. I think Zero Tac was from Europe. Somebody asked me about it a while back. Okay. I have not seen them here, so I really don't know. To me, offhand, they look like a very standard Light Optics Works scope. So I don't know. But I have not dug into it very much. Kyle, Alcan works well with night vision, very much so. Partly because it's short, partly because the way they did the coatings works nicely. Good scopes. I'm a big fan of Alcans. But basic problem with Alcan is that Alcan does not give a rat's ass about the civilian market. So they're really focused on military sales, so the civilian support is kind of iffy. In the civilian market, their one saving grace is that their master distributor is Armament. That's a parent company behind Agent Data. It's IS6. Armament has very good customer service. Nathan, what's Zone 1? I've been curious about that SIG, but haven't had the chance to play with one yet. Zone 1 probably comes from night vision terms, where you have different zones where you don't want to see defects. Mr. Alpine, I have a question about comparing Zeiss S3 6-36 versus the Razer Gen 3 6-36. My friend and I compared them quite a bit, and after a few sessions comparing them, we both found the S3. We were looking at 4 of them. Optically slightly better than the Razer Gen 3. We had 2 of them. We're wondering what situation or conditions should we look at to see how the RG3 is as good or better. Sorry to ramble. I also have the Zeiss S5 5-25 and find the S3 to be optically superior, but not an optics expert. Really interesting. I wonder how you're looking at them. So S3 is a nice scope. A Razer Gen 3, in my experience, was better. The biggest difference was probably imaging performance is very close. I've looked at maybe 3 or 4 S3s, and I've looked at, about 100 something Razer Gen 3s. When Razer Gen 3s just came out, there were complaints. So I went to Vortex and pulled off a cart with scopes stacked on them and spent several hours digging through them, looking at the turrets, looking through them, etc. I have a lot of mileage with the Razer Gen 3. So with this current crop of 6-36 scopes, they're all kind of related to each other. They're not identical. Razer Gen 3, other than having fairly unique turrets, has a different eyepiece. While it is very good optically, probably slightly better than other ones, so close, it is by far, in my experience it's not close, the easiest of them to get behind, especially on high magnification. So it is the most usable of the bunch. The Close second place of all the different 636 variants I've seen is probably the Element Theos. Very almost the same optically. Eyepiece is different, not quite as forgiving, but pretty nice. The turrets on the Element Theos is probably the best of the whole 6x36 bunch. Zeiss S3, other than the turrets, looks to be just absolutely standard light optics works design. It works very nicely. It is a nice scope, but it is more or less just what came out of the factory, best I can tell. There's nothing wrong with it. It works well. It's a nice scope. Would not pay full price on it. If we find one on sale, it's not a bad option. Alonso Kinking, is the VCOG shite? No, it's a perfectly reasonable scope. It's basically their normal 1:8 or whatever it is currently, packaged in a fancy-looking single mount, which makes it heavy as fuck and does not give you any real advantages. Aside from that, perfectly reasonable. Look, if it was $1,000, it was great. For what they're charging for it, it's nonsense. Bucket zone 1 means middle of image, correct? It's the term comes from image intensifier tubes. Mr. Conpack, it's all good. Answer them whenever. This has been a lot of great info already. Well, I'm glad I can help. Link. Is locking plus zero stop design very complicated and costly? I don't see any lower end scopes other than Athlon Helos 2-12. Have used them. No, it's not that hard. It's not that complicated. It's not that expensive. It does add some complexity and some cost. With locking turrets, it's hard to avoid slop between clicks, and in lower price ranges where you don't have as much time to do QC, it might be tough. But there are plenty of them out there, so it's clearly doable to have a $500 scope with the locking and zero stop elevation turret. I will say, though, in the vast majority of situations, unless it's a hunting scope or something like that, with MOL's designs, I prefer covered or locking windage turret and uncovered, non-locking zero stop turret, because it's easier to get better field that way. It's been proven out by many manufacturers over many designs. Nathan K. I watched Delta 34 ACOG guy video on the Turkish Elcan. They seemed a lot more civilian input welcoming. Fingers crossed. Yeah, I'm Jewish. Turkey can go fuck itself. I'm not touching anything Turkish. Moondog. I'm testing a Monstrum 2X forward magnifier. Is there anybody else with this type of long eye relief magnifier? I'm not entirely sure what a forward magnifier is. Magnifier goes behind the red dot, right? Or are you talking about the magnifier that screws onto the objective of a rifle scope? I'm not 100% sure. So primary arms had a long eye relief magnifier at some point, assuming you mean a traditional magnifier. Bucket, when did they release this? I've been running around asking about longer eye relief magnifiers for a while now. Question for you, why? What does a longer eye relief magnifier do for you? So I'm not sure. Mr. Alpine, yes, we both thought the Razer Gen 3 had a great eye box. We found the 7-35 attack is significantly behind the 6x36 scopes. I haven't yet got my hands on the Theos. My next scope purchase will probably be the Schmidt 6-36, hoping it's a noticeable step up from the Light Optics Works designs. It is a step up. How noticeable, it's hard to say. As you go to the higher price ranges, right, it's you'll hit diminishing returns, but it is clearly visibly a better scope. So, but it's also more money. If you're doing the 6-36, go with the TR2ID with the tree reticle. You'll be happier probably. Come back at this one. You mount in front of the dot. Why would you want to do that? On the surface of it, it's a fairly stupid idea. I don't know. So why would you want to put a magnifier in front of the dot? So the way a dot and magnifier thing works, you set up a red dot, you set it in, and your magnifier doesn't have to be consistent, right? If your magnifier wobbles a little bit, etc., it does not change your sight in. If you put a magnifier in front of the red dot, the orientation of the magnifier will change your point of aim and point of impact. So if you make it easily removable, you're depending on the mount for your zero retention. And I really don't understand what the reason. I'd love to hear what the reasoning is to do it in front of the red dot, other than just to do something different and hope that sells. Alpha, we only had one 7-35 to compare. So Attacker 7-35 is a nice scope, and then the higher magnification ranges, that optically it should be very comparable to the Razor Gen 3 and Theos and Zeiss S3, etc. I'm a little bit surprised that you saw it to be significantly inferior. Interesting. Okay. Moondog, the advantage of the Monstrum 2X is that you can put it in front of a prism optic and multiply your magnification. Correct. Okay, so not a red dot, a prism optic. So those exist. Tribe has done it. They've done a few on the binoculars. The alignment of this magnifier becomes very, very critical. I would not do it on a rifle scope. Because to be blunt, I do not believe that it can be done reliably and on a budget, so that it doesn't, through wear and tear, through retouching, and it doesn't all go to shit. But maybe. Kyle, is it really that beneficial to have that 1x with LPVO versus having better light transmission? An image quality of like a 2-12 with bigger lenses, at what point does it become fruitless? It depends. It's a LPVO versus MPVO argument, and it's a valid argument that it can be argued both ways. Depends on what you're using the rifle for. If your rifle is designed for moderate distances and extend out in a pinch, that's low power variable, because for speed of engagement stuff, there is a real advantage to 1x, and it's very much real and measured and everything. If this is a DMR-ish type rifle, where 1x close range is not the dominant reason for its existence, you'll probably be happy with the MPVO, right? It just depends on what the rifle is for. For a DMR rifle, medium power variable is a better idea. But for a general purpose AR-15 carbine that's used for a little bit of everything, including close range, if you can afford a nice low power variable, that's probably the way to go. Okay. Moondog, not eye relief, I meant eye box. Okay. Bucket, right, we have 5 minutes, guys, then I have to wrap up. I've mainly been interested in a forward mounted magnifier because the eye relief of a red dot is one of the primary advantages for me. It seems like a difficult concept, though. Interesting. So if you put a magnifier anywhere next to a red dot, front or back, your eye box is going to depend on the magnifier, not on the red dot. The moment you put a magnifying optic in there, that's a limiting factor for your eye box. Except if you put a magnifier in front of the red dot, right? So it means you need a magnifier with very long eye relief. A very long eye relief, it means the field of view is going to be like a straw. I do not think that's a good idea. What Moondog is talking about, he's putting basically a focal multiplier in front of a prismatic, right? Something that has a focusing optical system. That does not change the eye relief and eye box, etc. of a prismatic. That's a different ballgame. Okay. Nathan reporting to Kyle. Something from Hop about the TFB TV. His experience is more Badlands and civilian recreation. Yeah, I'm not sure who Hop is, so I can't tell you. All right, guys, you stuck with me for 2 hours. Many of you, most of you. I do appreciate it. I do have to wrap up. Locals limits the live streams to 2 hours, so I want it to be the same length on all the different platforms it goes on to. I'm going to finish going through the Mr. Conbucket's questions during the next live stream. I do appreciate you posting them. It made for a good discussion. I hope this has been useful. I'm traveling Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, so maybe I'm going to do a live stream from my hotel on Monday and wrap up a few loose ends. If you think of any questions that I have not answered, please put something in the comments, as is always the case. My website, darkmortaloptics.com, is where I look first, and whatever questions come there get answered first. And then as I have time, I'll go through everything else. Thank you all, and good night.